Welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Mates. As I said in our previous episodes, we've been doing something a little bit differently compared to our regular recaps. As I said, we're going to be inviting some fan TV channels and things like that that are not purely Supercoach, just to take a deeper dive into some of the teams that we're looking towards the end of the season. So we're lucky enough to be joined with Jake from the SCMate, not Supercoach Mate, Saints TV. How are you, Jake? And how's your season gone to date?
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Season to date, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. It's some highs like the weekend, and then there's been a couple of lows and a lot of in between where it's just not quite gone our way, but maybe another year of development will be all right. So, feeling good. Good to be here. Good to chat Saints footy with you.
Oh yeah, of course. Obviously the listeners know that I'm a Saints supporter, and I'm aware of who you are. I've listened to your podcast on a weekly basis and things like that. But can you give the listeners a bit of a rundown? I think we had you once a couple of years ago, but more a rundown of what you've done so far this season and what you kind of aim to bring to support, like St.Kilda supporters, like myself and others out there, to what you bring this year with regards to Saints TV and how you affiliate with the club and things like that.
Yeah. This year, the approach more recently has been, to unlock the doors of the players and kind of get the players in a bit more of a relaxed environment. We've been able to do that in the rooms, through the club and through some club sponsors, which has been awesome. So when I first started the channel, it was very much just a bit of a deep dive into the psyche of a Saints fan, and, the pure emotion, the highs and the lows, mainly the lows, as we know. But yeah, I guess the benefit of the channel growing is it's unlocked a few different avenues for me, and one of them is a bit more player access, a bit more club access, which has been exciting. And I'm not a big fan of the current media landscape as it is, and we've seen with the way the Western Australians treated Adam Simpson, that sort of stuff. I'm just not a big fan of the way they go about it, to be honest. And I want to bring a bit of a different, more authentic, more fan-viewed angle to the footy. And to do that with the players is pretty unique and pretty special. So that's kind of the avenue I'm going down at the moment, and where I want it to take me. I'm not going to put a ceiling on it. I don't want to kind of pigeonhole myself into I need to be in the media in 2 years' time or whatever. It's just I want to keep doing what I'm doing, and if it keeps growing and building and opens up more doors, then so be it. But the main thing is I'm just enjoying it and having fun. And that's while we're not actually winning many games. So can't wait until we actually become a juggernaut, mate. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, 100%. I think you really touched on a good point there. I know with the Premier League and things like that, and even the Euros at the moment, like a lot of UK YouTubers are in that scene where they have a bit more access to not necessarily players, but provide that content that is missing a lot in sport. You obviously see in the media, it's very watered down content. There's a very media-esque response that journos give, and they obviously have their own take, but to get a raw emotion from a fan, I think is a very unique perspective. Especially when they go to the game and they provide their own opinion, it's kind of it provides a lens to supporters who may not get the opportunity to go to games and things like that. So to provide that raw emotion, I think is really important. But moving on to our season as a whole, obviously I've got my own opinions about how our season went, but just wanted to get your thoughts on how we've gone as a whole so far, and what would you kind of letter grade give us so far this season? I've obviously listened to your podcast and heard differing opinions when it comes to the success of our season. But what do you think, first of all, how our season's gone so far, and what are the kind of the next steps forward towards obviously the last 7 games for this season and moving towards 2025? What do you kind of give it as a pass mark moving on to next year as well?
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of I think for most other clubs, it's pretty easy to pinpoint exactly where they're at. And for us, it's quite, there's a bit of a grey area because of, the way we've been under Richo, under Rats, the expectation under Ross, and the fact that we actually made finals last season. And I feel like maybe that's been to the detriment of the fan attitude or the fan expectations this season, where some fans might have maybe gotten a bit of ahead of themselves. And I mean, I did tip us to back it up and finish 6 to 10 again. And that's kind of what I said last year. So we did exactly that. We're not quite in the 6 to 10 range, but if we there's still time to do that. We probably won't make finals unless we win every game and a few teams lose games. But I actually think if we continue the trajectory that I saw on the weekend, and even the last month when I think about it, we're 3 wins out of 5, and the 2 losses were Port Adelaide by 2 points. We should have won that.
Yeah.
And Brisbane, we came home with a wet sail and almost, we scared that crowd at the Gabba, which is very hard to do, and losing by 20 points. So, and there's plenty of teams in the top 8 that are 2 wins and 1 win out of their last 5, Sydney have lost 2 in a row. So that goes to show how tight the competition is. And I feel like, I think it was Ross when he first came in, or maybe even Rats. He said, you're never as good as you think you are and you're never as bad as you think you are. And I really do think that's true. I don't think we are as bad as what some people say. And if you look deeper, when you hear those comments and you look at who's saying and how much Saints footy they've actually watched and the detail they go into, they just look at win-loss. And I feel like, as a fan, if you just look at win-loss, you're like 6 and 10, you're like, we're shit. But if you look at how many close games we've been in, the youngsters we've debuted, we're trying to tinker with the game plan during the season, which is always risky. And that might mean, to the detriment of maybe winning a few games we would have, we might have won last year and we've lost them this year. But then you see the fruits sort of blossom on the weekend, and we start to play attacking football, we start to connect, things start to gel, we get the players in the right spot, and we look good. So I think the next 6 weeks will dictate whether I think we've taken a step forward. I actually think we can take a step forward this year from last year. I don't think missing finals is a backward step. I think it's almost, from what I've seen, almost necessary, because you look at the top teams, you look at the midfields that we're up against every week. We're not at that level. So if we're blooding kids, we're sharpening our sort of attacking game style, because we know we can defend. We know that. Yeah. That's our bread and butter. It's about getting the ball and hitting the scoreboard more, which has been an issue. If we can fix that, then I think it's a pass mark. I want us to be top 8 for points 4 in the next 7 weeks. I've set that goal for myself. Some Saints fans will think that's silly, but that to me is really, really important. You can't be outside the 8 for points 4 if you want to be a contender.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. I think another thing that you obviously touched on previously is, in previous years gone by, and I don't know if it was you when you had a interview with Joey Montagna, but I remember him saying, I don't know if it was with you or someone else, but it's one of those things where when we were in that finals back in the COVID year in 2020, once we got out of it, the club were like, they're probably a little bit misaligned in where we realistically were, and thought, we're right in that window. All we need is a few top-up players like your Hills, your Butlers and all that to come in. Yeah. We'll get that success straight away. So I think the good thing and the positive thing is, even though we're not doing as well this season, and people said we overachieved last year, which we probably did, but I think that the change is that we've got a really strong core young group coming through. So your Naz, your Philippou and Owens and all that. So you got a core crux there that you can work with for the next 5 to 10 years. And you got your Marshalls, your Steeles and Sinclairs to be that kind of mentor at this stage. But obviously they're probably not going to be there in 5 to 6 years. But as long as we keep developing, I think that core group's really going to flourish. And we probably saw it on Saturday, how much it actually means to those players when they won against Sydney, like the kind of pure emotion. And obviously Steele was almost relieved in some regards about how much stress they probably go through on a week-to-week basis from some people say on social media, a toxic fan base in us when it comes to these losses and things like that. But that raw emotion was definitely there, and you just have to look at an interview like with Philippou, how composed he is and how willing he is to push forward as a club and as an individual. And I think those kind of moments put that club in good stead, because that in 2 years' time, when Sinclair and Steele might be on the latter end of their career, you've got that core edge coming through.
Spot on, and that's something that I haven't actually thought about too much. But when I hear anyone from the club really being interviewed or talking about where we're at or what we need to improve on, they all seem so assured. They all seem like, even the young kids, even when I interviewed Liam Henry in the rooms after the Gold Coast game, it wasn't a great game. We won, but he still knew exactly where, like, the over handballing, and we kind of fluff around with it a little bit when we should just go. like for him, and he's only 22 or whatever, like in his first season at the club, like for him to have that composure. And then you see Filippo, even Darcy Wilson speaks really well. And then Wilkie, Steele, Ross line every week. Ross in his presses, you just got to watch him and go, this guy knows exactly what he's doing and where we're at. He knows he's only giving the media what they deserve, which is not much, because he knows it's about what's in the four walls of the club. So not every coach is like that, and some people want more transparency, but I love that Ross holds his cards close to his chest. And it just makes me feel way more at ease that it feels like there's been so long since the goals of the club was aligned with the goals of the fan, right? We just want sustained success. We want to be a serious football club. We don't want to shortcut it. And finally, we've got stuff, people in place that know that's the way it is. We're not going to shortcut it. If we have to go down backwards this year to go forwards for the next 10 years, then I'm taking that.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it on there. And hopefully we see that moving into 2025. But moving on to a bit of a player recap of our season to date. So these are obviously Supercoach ranking points, which is Champion Data ranking points, same thing. But Sinclair, Steele, and Marshall round out the top three. And then, as you can see, there's a bit of a drop-off there with regards to ranking point specific, with Wood coming in at almost an average of 90. Now, obviously, these four players in particular are structurally so important for our team. Particularly Wood, I think he provides that two-way defensive running off the wing and pushing forward, I think is crucial. But obviously you don't have to delve into any of these four players, but from what you've seen on a week-to-week basis going to the games, who has been kind of that one standout player that you think has either galvanised the group a little bit, or you think is structurally that important that, we need him on a week-to-week basis to be competitive and to win games?
Oh, I think it's Marshall. I think it has to be, because we don't really... Tom Campbell supporting Marshall is okay, but if you lost Marshall... You've then got Campbell, you got to debut Heath, you got to debut Keeler. You're like, well, that's a bit risky to do, right? So we don't really have another backup. And the thing is, and the annoying thing is, Marshall's great in the middle, and he's not the best tap ruckman, we all know that, but it's just his around the ground work that just unites the entire team. But I dare say he'd be probably our best second tall forward next to King if we actually had another ruck. If you could have a full season of Rowan Marshall in the forward line uninterrupted, I really do think he can kick 40+ goals. I think he's absolutely capable of that. He's got great hands. He's a great set shot. It's just disappointing because we don't have that other ruck. So, but if we lost him, it's just who replaces him. Whereas, no offense, but if we lose Sinclair, we've got that many half-backers that can go into the middle or whatnot. Steele, we've got... we've always been pretty good at the inside game. It's more the outside spread. Mason Wood is crucial, like you said, because he's got that defensive running, but you can also go forward and be another tall or a medium-sized tall, especially when, we've had Sharman in and out of the team. We've had Membry not in the best form, so we haven't had really that other target. Jack Hayes has been injured. We can't rest Marshall forward, and Owens hasn't really hit the scoreboard like he did last year. So we haven't really had anyone outside of King, and then hoping Higo kind of bobs up for a couple, and he's been suspended for 3 weeks this season. So we haven't really, when you kind of look at it, you're like, not surprised we've struggled to kick goals, But Marshall would be my pick for sure.
Yeah, and I think following on that point, do you think moving forward that we've obviously seen the benefits of Marshall pushing forward and kind of creating that mismatch inside forward 50 when Tom Campbell's gone into the ruck to carry that load. And obviously Campbell's a seasoned veteran and probably not moving forward, not in that side purely because of age. But do you think moving forward that we need to experiment with allowing Marshall to go forward? Because I know Ross is very keen on, not making too many changes. And it's very obvious that when the team sheet comes out, obviously the last couple of weeks has been a little bit different. But before that, Campbell was basically a permanent emergency, and every time people were saying, "Oh, Marshall's a bit sore, he's battered, he can't get up next week," and then he plays fully. But what are your thoughts on that kind of two ruck-way combo? We saw it work really well with some clubs, and we've seen it work not so well with others. In specifically Melbourne, like taking that as an example, Grundy and Gawn just didn't work out because they were both not really a forward eligible player. But if you look at Marshall, how dominant he's been. He's kicked 3 goal bags of 3, 2, whatever. And he works so hard to push forward that he creates that mismatch because the defender is not aware he's coming. What are your thoughts on that moving forward into 2025 and onwards? Do you think Marshall's best suited as kind of a sole ruck moving into that Grundy-esque type of player, or do you think he's better almost allowing someone else to be in the ruck more or having a bit of an even split so he can spend more time forward?
Yeah, even split, to be honest. I think he's so crucial. If we don't find anyone else that can support King, Marshall's the man. I don't see anyone else. And I've never, there hasn't been a game where we've rested Marshall forward and he hasn't looked like the best forward on the ground, you know?
Yeah.
Every time he's forward, you know he's going to mark it. You know he's good for a goal or two. He could have kicked 4 the week before against Port, I think it was, or whenever it was. Oscar McInerney kind of does it for Brisbane. He does drift forward and he's that tall that it's just such a hard matchup. Gawn and Grundy didn't work because they're both pretty similar, to be honest. They're Marshall needs, Tom Campbell's he's literally just a ruckman, which just lets him handle the centre clearances, and then Marshall can do everything else around the ground. We don't need another around the ground sort of ruckman. Paddy Ryder was like that, but he was so good at the tap craft that separated him from Marshall. So if we had another Paddy Ryder like that, it'd be unreal.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't Rory Lobb. I've heard he's on the market. He's probably more a forward ruck like Marshall. I don't know if that'd work. But yeah, it's just kind of what's more important to Ross. I think if we're going to win a flag or look to win some finals, I know Marshall forward would be pretty crucial for me. But yeah, we've got Max Heath developing. I'd love to see him in the next month. I think we need to learn more about some of these boys before we can make a call.
Yeah, I think before we look at any permanent ruck trade-ins, I think those two boys in Kilo and Heath I think are going to be crucial in the next 5 to 10 years. But moving forward to a different position in the ground, more particularly the midfield in particular, we obviously seen Steele being so crucial for us this season and in previous seasons gone by as that number 1 main man. You have to look at his kind of ranking points in previous years. I mean, this series, he started the season on a house on fire, obviously had that knee concern coming in, and it seems to have hampered him a little bit. But obviously, we've seen the midfield mix last season pretty much being Steele, Crouch, and Ross predominantly. This season, it seemed to flip a little bit with Hunter Clark coming back in, Henry going through the middle, still being in there, but not as predominant. Who do you think is your kind of mainstay midfielders? We've seen Sinclair roll in there. Who do you think is the kind of, if you had to build that premiership side with the players that we've got at the moment, who do you think, I know you've been a big advocate on Mitch Owens going that midfield full time, but who is your kind of main 3 midfielders that you really think can drive the club forward and not only defensively, but obviously offensively being very dangerous?
I think we trialled a little bit on the weekend, but I really liked the Steele, Hunter Clark, Filippo balance. Yeah. It had something about it. Steele was kind of like the see ball, get ball. Hunter Clark, he's kind of a bit of everything. He's way more contested than people give him credit for. But he also gets out of the contest and his hands are very quick. And then Filippo offers that size and explosiveness out of the contest and composure. Yeah. So I like that balance. I like that Ross has actually trialled a few different combinations. We've seen Steele, Sinclair, who else? Even Liam Henry's gone through there at times, which has been really exciting. So he's not afraid to throw these boys in. Garcia, he's been in there a few times. When he's played, Paddy Dow's come back and done that. Seb Ross, we've kind of zoned out. Zach Jones, we've given them time this season, but obviously we know they're not part of the long-term plan. Although Seb might actually play this weekend because Windy's out. Yeah. Windy's another one. Windy's handy, but he's an interesting one because he's become the tagger, but I feel like if he's not a tagger, he can be that sort of exciting midfielder that can actually get the ball and run and hit a target. We just haven't given him that role. But I don't know. Marshall, Ruck, Steele's got to be in there. I mean, Sinclair, Steele, Sinclair, Clark, Steele, Sinclair, Filippo. I think Filippo, if you're talking premiership side, he's in the middle. That's no question, obviously. And then Marshall, if we're talking the next 5 years. So it's Marshall, Ruck, Filippo, probably Steele. And if I had to pick, I'd honestly pick Hunter Clark. I think there's just something about him. He offers something different to every other midfielder that we've got.
Yeah, I think Hunter Clark is one that's really important. We just look at the main complaint that fans were complaining about was in the start of the season when Hunter Clark wasn't there, was we were getting absolutely demolished in the centre clearances. As soon as he comes in, obviously it might not be a direct correlation, but he was basically, we were breaking even or winning contests. And he just seemed so composed. And we know how talented he is moving the ball forward. He's very composed. He just has so many freak injuries. But when he's on park fit, he's just provides that level of calmness that we don't seem to have without him. Like, you look at Steele, he's aggressive. Sinclair's kind of a cherry on top, and Philippu's still very raw. So to have Clark in the system for 3 to 4 years and can provide a bit of a level head in that midfield, I think super important moving forward.
Yeah, and he's good on his left foot, right foot. So it doesn't matter what side of the pack he's on. He's not too obsessed with, he's got to swing back onto his left, like maybe Mason Wood, who won't go on his right foot. So
yeah,
he's not stuck that way. Yeah,
100%. So now moving forward to the kind of the other end of the ground in the forward line. Now this debate has been obviously going on for a while. It's been there ever since he came to the club. I know when I posted something on Facebook, it blew up in regards to the kind of comments and the contradictory comments and kind of the debate people were getting out of this bloke. But yeah, Maxi King obviously is who we're talking about. Yeah. Half the supporter base says get rid of him. He should find a new club. Never again. Overhyped, all that sort of stuff. The other fan base is you got to stick through him, get through him. He's so important. Obviously, I'll get your thoughts in a minute, but kind of my 2 cents worth from what I see from it is, we looked at the game against Sydney. We obviously improved kind of an inside 50 entry, but it wasn't necessarily with who we had there. We had a pretty different forward line with regards to no height. We didn't have Caminiti. We had Membry as a basically key forward with Sharman. It was almost, as I said beforehand, it's like no Membry, no Caminiti, no King. The players started to have to find other methods to get it in, and they still bomb it forward. It was just there's no 2'10" bloke like King right there in front of him. And I think in your premiership side, you're going to have King in that side because there'll be times where there'll be key defenders they need to be taken out, and King's that person. But it was almost like when King's there, the pressure gauge is released from the midfielders because they know, or they think they know, that they dump it forward, things going to happen with King marking it from 6 rows back. I can guarantee you if they dump the ball in like they did on Sunday with King in the side, King kicks a bag of 6 because the ball's getting delivered to him more efficiently. But what are your thoughts on this one? Obviously, I think I know which side you're leaning towards, but yeah, maybe give a bit of an insight into kind of how King's been going this season and whether he almost needs a position shift when he comes back, or what's his best role coming back to give him that full confidence that he knows he's the main guy in that forward line.
Yeah, so any Saints fan that thinks we need to trade him or we're better off without him have got rocks in their heads. So I'm not going to beat around the bush there. Moronic comments. He's a very special player and he's only 20. He's just turned 24. We forget that he's had 2 shoulder reconstructions in like 12 months. Like that photo there. I remember that game against Melbourne when he came off in literally the first 30 seconds. You're like, this is the luck that this guy's had, right? We drafted him. He was injured. Now he's injured again. The good thing is I feel like he just needs to get his body right. I feel like he needs to get confidence in his body before he can get confidence in his game. Because this year we didn't see him flying for the footy like we've seen him do before. I just feel like he hasn't been right in that shoulder. It's been strapped every single week. And rarely do I see him go for those clunks. So I feel like as much as he's battling confidence with his own form, I think it is directly correlated to, I don't feel right. He just doesn't feel right. And we've seen Steele play through this. We've seen Steele play through injury. And does he look right? No, he doesn't. He's fighting through it. And King being King, obviously he plays in a position where it's very contested. He's getting triple teamed every week. I agree his behavior and his attitude needs to shift, but I feel like a lot of that does have to do with just him feeling comfortable. And I'm glad that we've kind of said, nah, let's rule this year out, get your body right, day 1 of preseason, come back and we're going to completely change the way, we operate with you. And yeah, to the people that think that we played better because he didn't play on the weekend, absolutely not. We actually played the same way that we did the week before against, was it Port? Yeah. Yeah. We played very similar way, but we actually hit targets. It's actually execution and accuracy. We kicked 13 goals, 6. this week. Because we were hitting targets central and close to goal. So it didn't matter who was taking the kicks. It was easy enough to kick a goal. Jack Higgins kicked 2 from the goal square, basically. Marshall kicked 1 from 15, 20 out. Sharman ran into an open goal. Membry marked on the goal line from Mason Wood. You know, and then, it's more method than anything, and we actually got that right on the weekend. So I agree with you when you say, like, if he played on the weekend, he's probably kicking 4 or 5 with the way the ball was coming and how quick with Filippo kicking to him, you know, favouring his side. The mids have just seen him as a shortcut. They just think that, well, we don't need to work for the entry because King will do that. The forwards will do that. So this is a good time now. I'm glad he gets his body right, but at the same time, the mids can start to look lower and go, okay, who's the best option here? Doesn't matter how big you are. Doesn't matter how, you know, who we think you are. You're the best option. It could be Liam Henry. It could be Higgins. It could be Butler. It could be a resting mid. It could be Marshall. That makes us more unpredictable. And hopefully that means when he comes back, we'll be ready to go. But yeah, you got to persist because we've seen forwards don't really peak until they're 25, 26, 27. He's a couple of years off that.
Yeah.
And he's tracking well, he still averaged 1.6 goals a game this year, and 1.9 over his career, which is pretty good when Kerno's 2.1. So, yeah, you look at the numbers and you think, okay, if this is a King that's not fired yet, like that's pretty good. Wait till he actually gets going.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think people forget as well, like, last season when he was doing a bit better, you know, we still had inconsistencies in that forward line. It was never really Membry and King fit for an entire season. Yeah. And then going into this year in particular, like obviously Membry going through his mental health battles as well, and then coming back healthy at the start of this year was just out of form, and that's understandable with kind of the year he had last year. But then you look at Membry suddenly out of the side, due to form issues, King now has to play a kind of different role in the fact that he doesn't have Membry leading up the ground. Like Membry's usually the one pushing up forward high inside 50 and then kicking the ball to King, whereas King, I think, at times is a little bit lost with regards to where he was meant to be because he's an excellent crummer of the ball. Like he'll essentially crumb the ball off his feet and kick it inside 50. But I think with the lack of pressure that we had in our forward line with regards to the lack of pressure from with Higgins and Butler, you know, King's basically doing 2 times the amount of work, just trying to do everything at the same time. And you can see him getting frustrated. You can understand that frustration. And I think he just needs, when he comes back fit fully, has a full preseason, just has a very clear mindset and a clear role with regards to what's expected of him. And I think the likes of Sharman in particular, I think is a key for him, just having a partner in crime that is consistent and can withstand the season. I think we'll see the best of him next year. Fingers crossed if he gets through this knee, no problem.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I'm moving forward. Before we move on to a couple of questions that you guys have left us, one player in particular I want to discuss and kind of moving into next year as well is Josh Battle. Obviously has had some talks with Hawthorn and Hawthorn have made it pretty public. They're pretty interested in him for XYZ reason. What are your thoughts on a Battle replacement or is it a person we can kind of replace easily? And my kind of second point is there anyone that obviously has been discussed in trade talks? I know we've been in discussion or have been associated with McCluggage, Brayshaw, LDU, those players. But out of those players in particular, and as well as a Battle replacement, what are your thoughts on players that we kind of need to target moving forward?
So, yeah, Battle, is he replaceable? Yes. Do I want to replace him? No. But do I want another mid in the draft before Tassie come in? Yes. Yeah. So there's 2 yeses there out of the 3. That to me says if a pick 6 compensation's on the table, I dare say we would be silly not to take it. You know, we know that our deficiency is midfield, and that leads me to the next point. LDU, you know, these sort of players are the players we need to be looking at. But, you know, North are actually looking pretty good now. So every player we've kind of gone for, McCluggage, who else is there? Stengel. I'm missing another one, but they've all re-signed. They're all re-signed. Yeah. I don't know if we're doing it deliberately to push up their prices and the clubs have to pay overs to keep them because St. Kilda's coming. Yeah. But Yeah, I mean, Josh Battle's been awesome this season, but the only reason why I say is replaceable, and it's not because of him, right? He's a very, very good player, and he's in great career best form, obviously. I believe he's replaceable simply because of the coach we have and how good he is at building defenses off almost scraps. Like, I even dare say, like, our backline in our grand final years wasn't the best in the comp.
No.
The structure and the way we were built, the way they worked together was why they were number one in the comp. And I think it's the same with us now. You know, like it's a semi-makeshift. Like we've thrown in Ari in there. We've had Cordy through there. Dougal Howard's been out of the team, into the team, out of the team again, back in. Cal Wilkie and Sinks are kind of and Naz are really the only three that have really been in there for the last 2 years. Webster, Stocker, and Patton have all been in and out, interchangeable. Like it hasn't, as much as people say it's been a steady backline, there has been quite a few, you know, sort of mixing and matching along the way, but the structure's always been there. We've rarely conceded big scores. Like we only conceded 82 against Sydney, who average over 100, you know? So I only say we can replace him because I trust that, you know, Ross knows how to work this backline. And like Ari's come in, could he play the role? I don't know. Kamanides been trialled back there, and I dare say he'd be very similar, following in Battle's footsteps, who was a forward thrown back, but ended up becoming a very good back. And Kamanides' game against Port Adelaide was exceptional. Before he was like it was a bit weird against Brisbane, but he kept Danaher to 2 goals after half time, which is pretty solid. It was a tough gig, playing at the Gabba and just thrown back there last minute, which is kind of weird. But then he backed it up, and I thought, he's got the bones of a good defender here. He can read the ball. His disposal's pretty good. He's a good mark. He's a big body. Is that a sign that we're pretty, you know, we're more than happy to let Battle walk if the price is right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think, you know, the signs were there when Caminiti was thrown back. It was definitely a unique decision, but, you know, Dougal Howard wasn't there, so it made sense. But, he looked very comfortable down there, and granted, he probably wasn't too confident kicking the ball outside D50, but I don't think not many players are. But he was just confident in a pack mark situation. I think him and Ari as a combo down there can kind of nullify the Battle leaving situation. It almost could mean Caminiti plays a key defensive role for the time being, and it allows Wilkie to play a bit more off the man, a bit more. And
Ari too.
Yeah, Ari as well. And we all know how Ari's good forward at centre. That goal he almost kicked from 65 metres.
That would have blown the roof off, man. That was unreal.
Yeah. So who knows? I mean, if the price is right, I think Battle walks, and it would be pretty happy both parties. And I think you nailed on the head. I don't think people forget that Battle wasn't a natural defender to start with, and Ross was a key pillar in kind of instilling confidence in Battle to show that he was play defence. And he's got a good track record with that, with obviously our 09 and 10 teams, with Clint Jones turning him into basically one of the best tags in the league.
Even Zach Dawson was pretty solid as a full back, you know? Like,
just knew his role and knew what to do.
Knew his role. I think we had Jason Blake down there. Shawnee Dempster was pretty solid. Sam Fisher, obviously an absolute gun, centre-half back, and was one of the best in those years. Yeah. But like you got Cal Wilkie. If Dougal Howard continues the form that I saw on the weekend, that takes the back line up another notch. You know?
Oh, 100%.
He's been down, but I think he's similar to Battle. Needs some confidence, and it looks like he's got it back, which is great.
Oh, exactly. I mean, one of the things that I noticed on the weekend with regards to Howard was, you know, we always lament as a fan base when he's got the ball. It's like Bonner-esque, where everything he touches is going to turn over. He makes these silly errors almost out of nerves. And the one thing I noticed was he was much more settled, and he knew what he had to do with the ball. Like, he wasn't looking for a silly 45 kick inside 50 or inside the middle of the ground. He knew as soon as he marked it, it's hands off or 10-meter punt to the kickers who can actually kick. And I think that's one of the biggest things we've developed as a defensive unit is the defenders who can't use the ball as nicely get them to the Sinclairs, Nazaiwa and Malerias, who can get the ball outside 50 very easily. And Ari just adds to that because he can launch the ball about 70 metres. It gives a bit of relief for the defence for about 10 minutes whilst they kind of reset, rather than dumping the ball 30 metres in the complete opposite direction. It gets turned over and it gets sent back the other way, and they're under pressure again. So I think that's really important. to touch on. But a couple questions that a few people have left. I've obviously condensed those three in particular because there are quite lengthy questions. But the first one is Pete asks, I'd imagine that the adjustment for players from any style of play in football to a Ross line style of play would be about as difficult of an adjustment to make for any player. How do the players seem to be coping, and how far away are we from having it functioning well and at a level which saw us rise to a premiership winning level? It was at that level despite the failure to finally getting one. So what are your thoughts on Ross Lyon's game style, and how well are we kind of as a club adjusting to that, as the media put it, that super defensive, boring game style? But as we saw against Sydney and Brisbane, as soon as we flip the switch, we're very dangerous moving forward.
Yeah, look, I think it's probably the biggest misconception in football that we play a defensive style. I think that's people that don't really watch the games and don't really read into it too much. We are like ranked 3, I think, or 2 or 3 with Sydney and Brisbane for getting the ball out of D50 and getting it to inside 50. Like we move it quick and we move it well. It's our only issue has always been the last kick inside 50. It is not getting it out of the defensive 50. It's not rebounding. I think we're actually, like, in terms of handball receives, we're right up there at top 5 in the comp. Rebounds, we're top 5 in the comp. We play a lot quicker than people think. It's just execution. It's missing the targets. There's games on, like, if we watch even the Fremantle game, even the Gold Coast game, they were low scores, but there weren't many stoppages. Like, it was end to end. It was just frenetic, and it was just turnover-ridden games. We just couldn't hit the damn target. And we hit targets on the weekend. If we miss some of those kicks, the game suddenly becomes defensive because we don't kick a score. Like, people just look at the scoreboard. They don't look at the way. And inside 50s, we average above 55 a game. Like, we're averaging plenty. We get it in there more than most teams. It's just, we just don't score when we get it in there. And I think to answer his question, how far away, I don't think we're that far away. I think it's a two-pronged thing. You can't really develop a game plan until you've kind of explored every single player on the list in multiple positions to see exactly what works best.
Yeah.
So I think last year, year of exploration, everyone says. I actually think this is the year of exploration. I think it was delayed. Yeah. I think last year was the year of overachieving. Maybe the year of exaggeration. Maybe we exaggerated how good we were and we made finals. This year is exploration. Next year's year of excitement. So there's the 3 E's for you. But I think this year is the year where, we're going to see, we've learned more about the Seb Rosses, Zach Jones. Tim Member is probably not going to be there in a couple of years' time. Maybe Ben Patton is on his last legs. Ronnie Burns needs to live, but he had a very good game on the weekend. We're learning about all of these sort of bottom tier players. And I think we're learning a bit about some of these youngsters as well. How much have we learnt about Mateus Filippo and his approach to football this year? More than last year, and he played every game last year. He's played less this year, and I've learnt more about him. No doubt Ross has too. And Mateus has probably learnt plenty about his own game. So I think, I don't think we're that far away. I think it's very hard. You go from a Brett Ratton style where it's probably not as, what's the word? I feel like you don't get pulled up on mistakes as much. Even at training, I noticed that with the difference in the way Rats would approach it and the way Ross would approach it. Training would kind of just run end to end and no problem. With Ross, he blows the whistle every 2 seconds if someone's slowing the play down. And that's why I always say we're not here to play defensive football. Because at training, Ross is pissed off if Dougal Howard gets the ball and goes backwards and he stops the play. He's like, no, there was kicks down the line. There was kick in the middle of the ground. Be aggressive. So he's trying to, I think we do it in training because there's no pressure. It's about learning to do it in the heat of the battle when there's teams coming at you. And we did that on the weekend. We handled Sydney's heat because their pressure was very good for the whole game. Sydney's pressure didn't drop. We just learned to handle it better. And hit targets under pressure, which is what the best teams do. So the next 6 weeks we'll know, to answer his question, but I don't think we're that far off.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Next question is from Steve. Is Steele injured? He seems to be in pain a lot. Is Pembury carrying an injury? And when does his contract end? Will he be there next year? Dougal has been a whipping boy. Was his game a fluke, or has he changed his prep and found a way to be less Gumby-esque?
I think for Dougs, I think it's always just been about knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are and don't overdo it. And I think
Yeah.
to me, that's what I've seen with a lot of Ross Lyon teams is he can take a player that has a million flaws, but if they have one strength, he will tell them, like he will mold them to just show that one strength.
Yeah.
And I think on the weekend, we didn't see many kicks from Dukes that was beyond 30 meters. They were good 15-meter darts, quick, cross goal, down the line, hit the target, punch the ball out of bounds. Be very, very simple with your disposal. Don't overcomplicate the thing. You're not Jack Sinclair. If you're going to try and pull off a fancy kick, you give it to Naz, you give it to Sinks, give it to Ari. Because if Ari shanks it, at least he's shanking it 60 meters down the line, and it's not going to turn over for a direct goal, right? So Dukes, I have faith in. I think Ross will mold him into a very... I wouldn't say he'd be an all-Australian level defender, but I think he'll be a very, very good fullback that just does the basics. And Zane Cordy did that, didn't he?
Yeah.
Like when we played Zane Cordy, do you see him overcomplicate? He marks it, hits a target 20 meters away, lets Naz and Sinks do the rest. So I think Dukes is fine. I'm not worried about him. Steele, I would say he's definitely playing injured and working through it, so the off-season is going to be big for him. Although what you showed with his Supercoach ratings, like if he's still pulling 107 average...
Yeah.
And he's not playing well, and he's not playing injured, and he's playing injured. That's pretty good. So he's battling through it, and I think he's building into the season nicely. Membry, I don't think he's playing injured. I think most of our forwards have just been dealt a hard hand because our entries have been pretty poor, our form's been poor, our mids have been poor in general, not winning enough of the footy. So, and to be fair, his own form, I'd say he would put his hand up and say it hasn't been great. There's been that many drop marks that I've seen, I can't count. Like the amount of they just slip out of his hands, which is just unlike him. So he looked better on the weekend. So like the VFL stint with Filippo has probably helped him. I don't know when his contract ends though.
I think I saw somewhere that, I don't know if it was another Saints trader inside or whatever, but I think some rival clubs are somewhat interested in him, and I can kind of see why. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But I think touching back on the forward line in particular with Membry, as Steve mentioned, is he carrying an injury and form and whatnot, and with King, especially those key forwards, you just have to look at. I mean, I'll tie it back to Supercoach because it is relevant, but you look at the ranking points from those halfbacks when they play against us, they're one of the highest rated halfbacks average against us because they get the ball out so easily and there's zero pressure. And I saw it, I think, it was been an away game. It would have been against, Brisbane at the Gabba in patches in that first quarter where we looked shocking. Was because it was just no pressure in the forward line.
Coming out so fast.
Yeah, Zorko just waltzed his way out of it like there was no tomorrow. And I think the Sydney game was the first time I saw what the pressure the forwards brought, as in the small forwards brought when we were in finals contention last year. Was I think there was a passage of play late in the term. I don't know what quarter it was, but Dougal Howard ran down Chad Warner. And as soon as he tackled him, you got Steele, you got Butler hanging off him as well. And it was like that 2 to 3 tackle combo. And that's the pressure that we need. That's going to release the pressure off King and Membry, because all of a sudden, when they're in the forward 50 marking for balls, the ball's going to, like if it drops out into the contest, you've got your Butlers, you've got your Liam Henrys fighting for the pill. And that wasn't the case, I think, early days of the season. And I think if they can manage that and the pressure maintains, we're really going to see the best of Membry and King and Sharman as well, that's for sure, as key forwards. But before we wrap it up, Pete just mentioned another one as well. How are we looking in regards to holding on to players? We've obviously touched with Battle in this regards, but how are we looking in regards to holding on to players with contracts needing renewal or coming up? We are obviously hoping to be able to build something that the players buy into and will want to see through to success. With Rowan Battle being discussed and rightfully highly regarded, are we really the anti-destination club that media speak of? Or have we got some genuine belief in our locker rooms? What are your thoughts on that question?
Firstly, the whole Rowe thing was just nonsense. So you can just forget about that. The fact that people are still mentioning that, just get over it. It was just fluff, really. He's not going anywhere. Josh Battle, I mean, he's got currency. It's in a position that we probably can replace. And also we would get pretty great compensation. So that'll play out the way it is. I'm kind of happy with both outcomes. If he stays, brilliant. If he goes, we're going to get a top draft pick, like I said before, and we're going to draft probably two of the best mids in the draft coming up, which is outstanding if we can do that.
Yeah.
In terms of keeping other players, I don't know what he means by that, because how many other players are really out of contract that we would want to keep? I think a lot of them are players that need to prove their worth. Yeah. They need to prove that they want to be part of something and prove that they can actually play a role in our next premiership. Ronnie Burns, Zach Jones, Seb Ross. I don't know if these guys are all out of contract, but I know there's like 20 of them or something. There's Allison, these sort of guys that won't. Houghton, like we haven't seen them. I wouldn't say these are players that we're like, I hope we keep them all. It's like, prove yourself. VFL, AFL, prove it. If you don't, I'm sorry, but that's it. That's where the road ends. So if we can trade some of them, if we can get something for them, great. If not, at least then we free up some salary cap, and that we've already got a war chest apparently, but it'll keep growing if we have a few delistings and we've got a bit of extra, change to spend. So, I don't think we're the anti-destination club. I think from the surface, again, if you don't look deeper and you just look at win-loss and you look at our history, maybe then it looks like it. Compared to we're competing with Hawthorn now, who are back and looking good. Essendon, who are playing pretty good football. North Melbourne are climbing in a slow way, but you dare say in 3 or 4 years' time they could be pretty dangerous. So, it's pretty much we're competing with every Victorian team except Richmond right now. But Richmond still have the pull of Punt Road and a big membership base and big crowds at the MCG. We don't have that. So, I agree we're probably on the lower echelon, but Ross Lyon has pull. A lot of players love him and want to play for him. And who doesn't want to be part of the second flag for a club that has been a joke for so long? Exactly. Like, if you like, some players will just do it for the easy victory. But you know what? For me, if I was a LDU, I'd be like, you know what? Both options are great. North are in the gutter right now. I can stay and build something there. They've got good youth. Or I got Ross Lyon. I can be the number one midfielder in this team, and I can help this team grow and win their second flag. So I think there's plenty of selling points, that we've got. But obviously, the newspapers and everyone like that, they favor the bigger clubs, so they're always going to talk more about them than us. So, no, I think we're in a good position. Renewals, not fast, and destination club. If we don't get LDU or these sort of players, a bit disappointing. But I still think there's plenty to work with that we've got.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, you just have to look at that clip of. When it was at centre bounce, where basically Philippou no-looks it to Liam Henry and inside 50, and you score from that. That clip in itself, I think, is very exciting. And I think, you look at Hawthorn, how they have that hawk ball and that club destination family vibe. They play an exciting footy. That second half against Sydney, if you package that up in one membership package and send that out, I can guarantee you your fans will be looking forward to 2025. That's for sure.
Exactly. And we've got 6 games at Marvel after this weekend, so if we can go on a bit of a run, build the crowd, get some noise going, beat some of these top 8, top 4 teams that we're going to be playing, that's the selling point right there too. Finishing the year with some momentum is important, even if you don't make finals.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Before we wrap it up, just a quick one that we ask all our guests that come up on. Is there any content creator that you've worked with in your ventures and other collaborations and things like that you would like to see in a future episode? It obviously doesn't have to be St.Kilda related, but anyone that you've worked with.
The 2 boys that I work with on Footy Abroad are pretty awesome. So Terry from Blue Abroad's amazing, and his channel, like, he and I have kind of been in contact since 2018 when we started the channel, so that's been awesome. And obviously Luke from Swoop Luke, Collingwood as well. So 2 big clubs, 2 clubs that are battling it out for the top 8, top 4. So I'd have to say them. Terry, Blue Abroad, Swoop Luke, awesome guys. So check them out.
Sounds good. No, but really appreciate you hopping on this, Arvo. I know the ton of work that you do for St Kilda Fan TV and stuff like that, and I think you bring a really unique perspective into the eyes of the St Kilda Football Club and kind of the eyes of a fan, or through the lens of a fan perspective. But I think also I really appreciate it. I don't know how other fans see it, but I know that you having to do the review each week in your car or whatnot, and regardless, thick or thin, I can understand how frustrating it might be, especially if you lose by 2 points and you want to probably demonetize us.
Yeah.
putting expletives
Absolutely.
left, right, centre. But yeah, really appreciate what you do for Fan TV in general. And I think moving forward, I think that is one thing that is really going to shine a new light on AFL media and things like that. If clubs in general can be a bit more well exposed to these kind of fan TV channels and things like that, because the fans pay good money for memberships and things like that, and they want to see as much exposure to the club as possible and fan TVs and things like that. You just have to look at, universally, like the UK clubs do it really well. But hopefully that's something that you can venture in and push forward with the channel. And I've seen it grow as well, and how impressive it's been over the last couple of years. But keep up the good work, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yep. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Go Saints.